Hi, and welcome to Hands-on AI, where we navigate AI adoption in financial services. I'm Max Eber, the co-founder and CPTO of Taktile. Today, I'm joined by John Wiethorn, the head of FinCrime Compliance and AML BSA officer at Gusto. We talk about how financial crime teams are actually using AI today, why rules engines are here to stay, even with AI, why teams need to think of risk as a product, and why he thinks regulators will want you to adopt AI for FinCrime very, very soon. Let's get into it. John, financial crime is an interesting space because it tends to be a bit downstream of product decisions. On the other hand, it does shape the business and the product in pretty fundamental ways. So you own AML and BSA for a platform with lots and lots of small businesses. So would love to understand where you see financial crime actually showing up versus where people might expect it to show up.
Ooh, I like that question. I think the general public may not think about financial crime daily unless they're really into true crime podcasts. So the reality is it's an operational reality for every single institution that's moving money. But if you are a small business customer, and for the small businesses that Gusto serves, a single fraud loss for a customer, whether from phishing or scammers or cyber threats, that can be an existential threat to your small business. And so for us, it's all about proactive defense. So Gusto's role is proactive protection. So that's all about utilizing detection systems to identify unusual activity. And then there's the human shield, right? So you have your technological systems there that are going to detect your anomalies, but then you have to have your specialized compliance staff to provide that intervention. So they act as that shield so the customers can focus on serving their business. So the idea is if you're doing it right, customers don't even know that you're there.
Everybody's talking about AI and FinCrime. So how do you think about supporting investigators versus automating things, and also potentially the risk of taking away the human judgment that regulators want us to apply it, and it might just be good. So yeah, what's your philosophy there?
I really have a philosophy of empowerment. So my core philosophy is that the best investigators deserve the best tools. And we view AI not as a replacement for human judgment, but as a mechanism to eliminate friction. So when I look at AI, and AI is, let's be honest, advancing so quickly, month over month.
Crazy.
The biggest thing we can do is reducing administrative drudgery. So we deploy AI to handle manual tasks like data aggregation, file retrieval. So if you can allow investigators to focus on shifting from data gathering to analyzing, you are basically making them have superpowers, right? Because we maintain a human in the loop structure where AI is going to give our subject matter experts all of the information they need. So that enables our investigations that are faster, more thorough, and deeper than manually doing that in a manual capacity would allow. And there's a lot of regulatory defensibility with that because everything that I've described, if you're automating administrative tasks or research tasks, as long as you prioritize an audit trail, it's fine, right? And the process can be very accelerated, but the decision path remains vigorously documented so that we can satisfy regulatory expectations. And the side benefit is job satisfaction, right? Because nobody who's an investigator enjoys, let me screen capture this, let me PDF this, let me save this. Nobody wants that. But if you get an AI agent that can automate that and be like, hey, I researched this subject that you wanted to know about. Here's what I found. And you're like, okay, this is a really good starting point. Can you go retrieve this? Or let me look at that. Suddenly we're cutting out so much administrative time and we're just focusing on the analysis. And so analysts work on more cases. And so they're developing experience faster and they're getting more in depth. So it's great. We're loving it. And I think every week we are exploring new ways that we can test out AI use cases.
Amazing. Yeah, we know this is true actually across the company, that I think everybody naturally likes impact, right? People are motivated and you can just have more impact because you do more boring stuff or less boring stuff, and the things that actually matter, you do more of. So people enjoy the work. So when you see financial crime programs that work really well, what are the things they get consistently right that weaker programs tend to miss? And this is like regardless of technology, I think.
Yeah, I love that question. I think it's people over platforms. I think success ultimately comes down to talent. So you can buy the best software, but without the right people, the program is going to fail. But every time. And there's a cost to churn. And weaker financial crime compliance programs suffer from high turnover. And that destroys institutional knowledge that you're going to have about knowing your customers. So for us, at Gusto, our mission is work that empowers a better life. And that starts with our employees, who we call Gusties. And, we invest in leadership training and internal mobility. And not only because we want to provide those things, but it's a risk management strategy. Because if your employees are more engaged and they are working on exciting things, that, like we talked about, AI, they're using these cutting edge tools, they're going to stay there. And as engaged, I would say an engaged, appreciated team is going to work much harder to protect your customers than a team that doesn't feel appreciated, or a team that is using really substandard technology. Or like, nobody wants to deal with that, right? Like, nobody wants to deal with some antiquated system that's been around for 25 years. People want to be engaged with the work they're doing and have the best tools to do it.
Amazing. It makes no sense, except I think in the industry, probably 9 out of 10 companies are in that bucket, I would guess.
It's changing though. I think there's so many options now. It's just, I think what's interesting is smaller companies can transition to newer products faster, right?
For sure, yeah.
But I think we're seeing even larger banks are looking and saying, "Hey, we've used this for a long time. This product hasn't changed. Why don't we explore the other out there?"
Yeah, and switching costs have gone down with even large banks now buying SaaS. They go
Yes.
cloud. You can migrate data much more quickly now. AI helps you also do the migration. So I do
Also,
think,
MCPs for any tech people out there. I love an MCP versus APIs. There's a lot of technology that is just going so fast that it makes it easier. And I think with AI, more vendors and more companies they're signing shorter contracts, right? Because so you might be the best software today, but will you be a year from now with all the advances? And so I think there's some great pressure, and I view it as a great thing because I'm a buyer of software. But I like that there's pressure on the industry to iterate your software and make it better and keep up with
yeah,
the technology.
no, I like it too because we're challengers. For us, it's also good if people understand that the tech is moving fast and they might not want to have the same system that hasn't changed in 10 years. And I think
Absolutely.
it's a thing that resonates with our customers too, to say, hey, look, yes, we're the younger vendor, maybe against name it legacy sort of big company, but you want the innovation or not? And I think people are tilting much more towards the innovation at this point. And so what would you say is sort of the most misunderstood thing when you build automations? So you talked a bit about how you think about empowerment, automating the drudgery, focusing the human, but is there one concrete example you can give around, you say to an engineer, automate this thing, and they always get it wrong because they don't understand the domain and what actually matters?
We're always prioritizing education. So we want to ensure engineers understand the why behind the controls. And I think collaboration is your first defense against misalignment on that. But in terms of specifically, and I will say this generally, I think that the most common misunderstanding is the set it and forget it fallacy.
Yeah.
So a lot of building is like, well, we build it and we launch it and then it's shipped. But with an AML system, shipping like a new rule, that's just the beginning,
Right.
right? Now, it might not need more engineering work if you have all the data points that you need, but they are living systems. They're dynamic, all right? So we're constantly testing and tuning rules, above the line testing, below the line testing, model validation testing. So there's a lot of things you have to do. You can't just set it and expect it's going to be the same. And the reality is financial crime risks are organic and dynamically evolving. And if controls remain static, they degrade immediately, right? Because criminals, they plan, they train, they understand, oh, this isn't working. So they change their tactics. So we frame automation as you're automating parts of a living system that requires constant iteration. And so you need to make sure you have the right talent behind your systems to make sure that you're maintaining them as well. But I'm all about education. And I find most engineers, when they come into this space, they love it. Because it's really neat to see, hey, we built this thing with code and it's actually stopping crime or it's detecting crime.
It's very different from traditional software where there's requirements, you hit the requirements, you do
Yeah.
user acceptance testing and it ships and you move on. Whereas
Yeah.
I think it's more similar to all the other things we've seen in MLOps, machine learning, everything data where the thing constantly evolves and you need to also budget for it being evolving and you having time to actually iterate, etc. And one thing I'm very excited about on our side is we've been working on AI to help with the iteration journey. So less, we also have the agents in the decision, but also helping you monitor the decisions proactively, improve the decisions proactively, more the outer loop around the analyst journey, which I think that'll be pretty cool once we can get the systems to help us improve the systems themselves. And potentially eventually, you go autopilot. But I think first step would be just be like really fast and coming up with ideas for improvement, how to tweak a threshold, which rules are stale, which rules should we adjust. I think that's going to be pretty wild if we can do that. And then mixing and matching the rules-based side of it with the AI side of it.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to the next question, which is, I mean, AI is sort of the thing everyone talks about, but it's rarely like one shot, you call an LLM and that's it. But it's more often a mix of things. So how do you think about rules, classical machine learning, large language models and agents, and maybe just traditional code-based automation? How does that all fit together?
So this might be controversial, but there is a power in simplicity, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you're going to have static rules that say if X, then Y rules, and they will continue to be really effective at catching known typologies. So I think we don't want to add complexity just for the sake of it. And the baseline is static rules in transaction moderation. Static rules remain critical for regulatory coverage, ensuring we have our major bases covered. So if there are known pieces of activity, very simple, we can build some rules, we run them, we catch things. I think where the AI is exciting is AI can catch the unknowns. So this is where it's the trends, it's anomalies in static rules, or where static rules are missing things.
Yeah.
And to risk rate alerts so that investigators can prioritize highest risk cases first. Again, more important if you have a lot of volume in a big shop or a big business where you have thousands of alerts generating. If you can say, hey, based on everything you've ever investigated, these are your more likely to hit. And then that really enables you to tune better. And AI is incredible at tuning rules, where you used to have a couple data scientists sit around and be like, well, like, what if we tweak this? AI can do that in minutes now, right? So really, really exciting. But I don't think the goal is to replace a rules engine. I think to supplement it. I think that's where we are with the technology today. And I think the challenge is, and I welcome someone to build AI that can overcome the challenge, is that AI, because the crime is always changing, an AI model is never really finished. And so if you get rid of static rules in your controls, you're potentially going to miss like really low hanging fruit of things that you should have caught. And as long as they're tuned well, there's no problem having static rules.
Yeah.
And then it's just a question of how effective are the AI rules or an AI agent that's alongside.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done some pretty interesting work on looking at, it was more bank transaction type data, where we said, okay, there's the traditional way of doing this, which is you code up your velocity features and you're moving averages and then you put your thresholds on top, etc. But then we've layered on top an LLM and said anything suspicious in this history, and you give it the last 1,000 transactions for a business, and it comes up with different things. It's like, okay, in this industry, it's actually weird that they do this and that. And this is actually a yellow flag that they buy things from this type of shop, even though they're in that industry. And this seems like they're commingling that account with a private thing. And so stuff is really hard to catch with a rule because it depends so much on the context of what industry is this, like where are they based.
Sure. I imagine one of the challenges, though, is if you tell a prompt or you tell an LLM, they'll find what's suspicious. It's going to find something suspicious everywhere, right? So there is a risk that like every customer is suspicious. We better stop everything.
Well, I mean, it needs tuning, right? It needs like, okay, is this the yellow flag? Is it a red flag? I mean, and then you think about, okay, maybe it's a loyal customer we've seen many times. I don't care about the yellow flag so much. It's a new customer that I've never seen. There was already a yellow flag earlier. There's another yellow flag. Well, that's different. So it definitely needs tuning. But I think it's interesting to really cater to the strengths of each type of technology. And we shouldn't ask about, oh, are LLMs weak here and there? Of course, like they're expensive and they're slow and, they are weak in some parts, but the question is where they're strong. And then can we use that to our advantage? I mean, I'm also pretty bullish on this because I think once they get faster, and we've seen some really impressive companies in the hardware space that speed up LLM inference. There was just recently something announced and Llama inference at 15,000 tokens a second. It's like blazing fast, where if that works out and becomes commonplace, you can put it directly in the auth stream of a credit card transaction, which was historically not possible for speed reasons, but also cost. But that can also allow us to catch much more fraud because now you have this incredible reasoning engine that's quite subtle in how it looks at the patterns. I also think next 18 months or 2 years or so, we'll see complementary approaches where you say, well, I want my bases covered. And then I experiment with the LLM on top and hope to get more juice out of it. But the replacement, we'll see. I think hard to predict beyond 2 years at this point because the tech is moving so fast.
I can't predict beyond 6 months, honestly.
Which brings me to my final question. I mean, what are your predictions for AI and fin crime and AML BSA going forward generally? Let's say time horizon 2026, end of the year, I think.
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to see advances in our ability to adapt general AI tools to specific compliance workflows. So at Gusto, we're very AI native. So we are constantly looking at not just on the detection, but on the investigation, on the administrative side. I think AI is just getting so embedded into so many processes. We're going to see that continuing to happen. I think regulators are going to move more from an observation standpoint to more specific guidance on AI usage. We're starting to see that. We're starting to see some more guidance on that. But I also think there's a new standard probably by the end of this year where incorporating AI will transform from a competitive advantage to a regulatory expectation.
Yeah,
I think regulators are going to be like, well, why aren't you using AI?
exactly.
Right. And I think that companies not leveraging these tools are going to fall behind that standard of care of detecting and fighting financial crime. Because if everyone else is detecting it and you're not, you're now the weak target, right? You're the very attractive target for criminals because you don't have those defenses.
We've never had better tools to look at data. So
Yeah.
makes sense to use them. Really good. John, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on Hands on AI. To find out more about the future of risk, follow me on LinkedIn under Maximilian Eber. And to learn about how Taktile is powering AI adoption in financial services, go to taktile.com. That's taktile.com.